We have a little district next to our name. That's fun.
Council will call the meeting order. For the record, it is February 6, 2024 at 4:30 PM. We'll begin this evening's or afternoon city council work session with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Cavanagh. Councilwoman Little Roberts.
Here.
Councilman Taylor.
Here.
Councilman Overton.
Here.
Councilwoman Strader.
Here.
Councilman Borton.
Here.
Mayor Simison.
Here. Next item up is adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton.
the agenda looks fantastic. There are no changes to it. I move that we adopt it as published.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda as published. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the agenda is adopted. First up is the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton.
the consent agenda, looks appropriate as well. There's no changes to it. So I will move that we approve the consent agenda as published for the mayor to sign and clerk to attest.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the consent agenda is agreed to. There were no items moved from the consent agenda, so we'll move on to department commission reports. First item up is item 22, which is resolution number 24-2435. A resolution establishing the appointment of Bethany. I'm not even gonna say the last name because I know I will just butcher it. To seat 6 of the Meridian Solid Waste Advisory Commission and providing an effective date. So council, I was able to sit down with our SWAC president, Steve Corey, and interview Bethany. Bethany had originally applied for some other positions within the city that we had open. But after conversations with her, looking at how she was looking to get involved in some of her expertise in marketing, we felt that having a citizen voice on SWAC, as well as somebody that if there are future larger changes in SWAC, which, or could involve composting, that having someone with her professional skills to help us in how we communicate with the community good, and then just her overall wanting to get engaged with the city. But she's 3 years into the city, the small business owner that does marketing, and she is ready to get involved. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have regarding Bethany. Not, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton.
I appreciate Bethany stepping up to the plate. I will say that the Solid Waste Advisory Commission does good work and provides some pretty good granular direction and advice, at least to this council, to make some decisions for our community that are really important. So it's a big lift, so I appreciate her participation and willingness to serve. So I will make a motion that we approve resolution 24-2435, appointing Bethany Giardo to seat number 6 of the Meridian Solid Waste Advisory Commission.
Have a motion and a second. Do I have any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the resolution is agreed to. Thank you, council. Next up is resolution number 24-2436, a resolution establishing the appointment of Brian Garrett to seat 1 and Matthew Sandoval to seat 4, the Meridian Planning and Zoning Commission, and providing an effective date. In a similar fashion, we have quite a few candidates, so we're interested in serving on planning and zoning. And, part of it, we also have a unique situation where the person who rolled off was the only person that lived south of the interstate. So that was an important consideration, was trying to make sure we had a voice in South Meridian. And when we were going through the process, we also had another one of our commissioners, Mandy Myers, step off. She's been, she recognized that she had some challenges with attending, and she was hoping that her personal and professional obligations were going to get better, but she didn't see that, and she understood the need for the city to have people actively engaged, which led us with two opportunities for this position. So Andy Seal and I interviewed folks, and the two that seemed to meet our preferences were Brian Garrett, who lives in South Meridian. Brian is a retired banker, and I use banker liberally. He used to go into when banks were failing and be part of the turnaround team to help them do that. That was he's a community banker for many years, and then that became kind of his second career. So he's very familiar with regulations. He's also familiar with the development process through his community banking elements. He lives in South Meridian, so he's right down there, not in the area of impact, but about as far south as you can get on the very edge. And so he can help us as someone be familiar with what is coming through and knows that part of the community. Actively engaged otherwise around the community, more so him and his wife together. And I think that he'll bring a different perspective than a lot of other people currently on there, whether it's, his life experience or other things. Conversely, the other individual, Matthew Sandoval, and I didn't bring my notes, I grabbed the wrong notes, but I remember Matthew well enough. He had a very different background. He was with I think it's the Idaho Division of Public Works. So he's kind of in a different role within the own development world, and sees it from the state's perspective and how they go about doing their projects. But just younger family, definitely has a desire to get involved and get engaged, but also has a background, military background, and others to understand the processes and look at it from a professional side of it as well as a personal and community member. So those were our recommendations for planning and zoning. Happy to answer any questions. If I need to run up, grab my notes, I will, but that's our planning and zoning recommendations to you.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
appreciate you giving us a little bit of flavor for these two appointees. Planning and Zoning Commission is such an important, almost a critical partner of our work, and so appreciate the time and attention that you got to bring these two names before us. So I'd move that we approve resolution number 24-2436, appointing Brian Garrett to seat 1 and Matthew Sandoval to seat 4 of the Meridian Planning and Zoning Commission.
Have a motion and a second to approve resolution number 24-2436. Is there any discussion?
Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Just two maybe quick points that I think is maybe important. We've seen a lot of change in the Planning and Zoning Commission. We've seen some change on the City Council as well. I can't remember the last time we've had a joint meeting with that body, and so that's something I'd like to maybe ask you and your staff to work with Planning and Zoning to see if we could get something scheduled between now and maybe through budget so that we have an opportunity to meet them, make sure that we're all on the same page. And then along that line, Mayor, I'd ask maybe you and your staff to look into, I've received some pretty consistent feedback from planning and zoning commissioners of the past asking for more training. They feel like it takes them a long time to learn the role, and that they often feel like unless they're the chair, that they're kind of building that ship as they're flying it, and they would like to be a little bit more empowered to know that they're making the right decisions. So I don't know what exists, but if we could have maybe our planning staff to maybe put their heads together to find the best way to onboard these two new commissioners, then replicate that process so they're set up for the success from day one.
Thank you. I know they are onboarded, but I don't know if you can ever learn until you learn. AIC is also rolling out a training on planning and zoning as well, so we can see perhaps that provides some additional perspective that is not currently there, but we will continue to do that and get them educated as best we can. But I think we are also probably dealing with some of the most complex issues, and that's the challenge. And I know that a lot of people face.
Certainly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. and the resolution is agreed to. I do see Bethany just showed up. Bethany, we have already done your, but if you'd like to come forward and make any comments to the council and introduce yourself, I'm sure they'd appreciate that.
Nice to meet you all. I am really excited to be a part of contributing to the city. I've really loved living here. I feel like you guys have done an amazing job. And I saw this opportunity to get involved. My background, I work in marketing. I work with a lot of different clients, and I'm also passionate about being involved, and I really believe in that saying, do what you can with what you have where you are. And so, I wanted to throw my hat in and help contribute to this great city that we call Meridian. So I'm really excited to be involved and try to make it even more excellent than it already is. So thank you for having me, and look forward to serving.
Thank you, Bethany. And don't feel like you need to stay for the meeting unless you just want to because you're interested, so. All right, next item up is item 24, which is comprehensive financial plan discussion. I have Mr. Lavoie's name on here. I don't know if this is Mr. Lavoie, our president, if it's myself, who wants to kick off what conversation people like to have.
Sure, Mr. Mayor. I
That's
think
important.
Councilwoman Strader is going to take the lead on this discussion, but I'll frame it just briefly. The start of the year, there's opportunities to kind of revisit or reacquaint ourselves with policies and practices that we follow, remind ourselves the reason why we do them, and give us a little roadmap of what we might be seeing. This is the budget season. It's always budget season, I guess, right? Just 12 months a year. But the big lift is in the works, certainly. And some of that includes, to a large degree, the CFP and how it's utilized. And about 4 or 5 years ago, we made the wise decision to document and memorialize a standard practice. Councilman Cavanagh points out, council members come and go and we change. And one of the things that's very dangerous, or can be, is if you don't have a consistent practice in the manner and method of developing and creating a city budget. And Meridian does it better than anyone in the state. I've heard many other cities say that and describe it as such. And I think that's due in large part to our policies that we have adopted by ordinance and that we abide by them. So we rolled out recently the budget calendar that you've all seen that denotes a lot of those activities, not necessarily impacting council directly, but the budget development and the CFP, how it's utilized, the comprehensive financial plan, utilized as a tool to help build and create the budget that we're going to see, is an important part of that policy. In prep for today, everyone was provided another copy of what they've seen before, the financial stability policy and the fund balance policy, among others, that gave you a little background of that consistent practice we're trying to develop. So what we thought in some discussions with council members and Councilwoman Strader's, really on top of this discussion, and that is the need for us to collectively share how we think this could and should be used, and also make sure we ask questions of each other or the mayor so we're on the same page and understand what the next 3 months are going to be providing us. So June is then productive. So that's what launched the discussion, and the desire to use this workshop seemed to be appropriate to kick off a discussion amongst all of us.
Okay,
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, starting in last year's budget process, I started to take a keen interest in the CFP and trying to understand how we can use that tool for our long-term planning as we're supposed to, as outlined in our policies. And then I have been kind of digging into it. I think what would be great to get out of this meeting, I think, would be to hear from a few different people. I think we could hear from Director Lavoie regarding the background, and I think that might be a good place to start, how the CFP was created, what its purpose was at that time. I think that would be really interesting for us to hear. I think perhaps we could hear from some department directors, or if Mr. Lavoy has had, if Todd has had feedback from people regarding the CFP. I think it would be interesting to hear that. I think what we could do is walk through the CFP, and I actually started from the place of wanting to see enhancements, not necessarily changes to our policy, but actually see more engagement by the council in the CFP process. So I think we could have a discussion there, but I think ultimately it would be helpful to hear from you, Mr. Mayor, your views on the CFP and your role in that process, and then hear from the individual council members what their opinions are, and if we should, maybe we can get some consensus on whether we'd like to make changes to our policies, if we'd like to adhere to our policies, if we'd like to keep the policies the way they are, but see some enhancements in our processes and so forth. So it's just kind of an overview in terms of maybe a rough agenda for this evening.
Okay. Mr. Loy, I'll turn this over to you then.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to address the history. That was the question that we have. So this started back in 2015 with the previous mayor, Mayor Tammy. During the annual budget process, no different than what the current mayor does right now. He asks the fellow directors to submit their needs for the upcoming budget year. So she did the same thing back then. We did not have a consolidated collection of requests. So at times, Mayor Tammy would be presented with new things at that moment in time, and she didn't like that. So she goes, could we maybe work with the directors to collect this data so that she could read what they want for the next 5 to 10 years before this meeting occurs? I go, task accepted. Let me go work on this. So starting in November 2016, we put together a group to build a centralized database called the CFP that we would be able to work with the fellow directors and subject matter experts and managers to be able to request from them what they need from the citizens and council to approve over the next 10 years to meet the city's strategic plan. So we built this database to collect this information so we can share it with the mayor so that one, she would see what's coming down the road. She wouldn't be caught off guard on what is coming down the road. And we would also share it with the fellow directors so that more in line with the support staff, if police wants to add 45 people or fire wants to add 12 or IT wants to add 6, we know that we have a support request, so then we can adjust our needs in this same form or fashion. Hey, if we're adding this many people, we need to add this. So it was primarily set up to be a communication tool from the directors to the mayor, and then from the mayor to the fellow directors to each other. And then it would get to also the council members, say, this is where we're going. Take a look at it. What do you think? This is our time to start communicating. If you see something you don't like or do like, please work with us. That was the intent of it back in the day. It was just a communication tool so everyone can see where people are going in the next 5 to 10 years. She also then asked me, hey, if we know what we're going to need, could you put a revenue and expense guesstimate together? I go, I have the revenue forecast for 10 years. I can easily do that with the assumption that I'm taking the 3% every single year in this modeling and using other little forecasts. So every year I'd put this together for her, say, hey, this is what your 5 and 10 year forecast looks like. If you did everything within the plan, could you fund it? And as we all know, the answer is always going to be no to that. There's always more requests than resources. So I said, well, what if we just looked at the 5 years? Could we maybe balance that, allow the mayor to talk to the directors, say, I understand this is what you want, but I need to start having these conversations with you guys that this isn't probably going to be able to be funded. So let's just start the conversation, move things around so that we can kind of balance this item as opposed to just waiting to the end, every fiscal year. So we then put in the policy and approach that we would try to create a balanced budget for 5 years, knowing that the second 5, we have enough time to turn the ship if we need to, because that's 5 years out, and every year we do a budget, we can say, okay, let's adjust. That was the intent of the conversations I had back with Mayor Tammy, back with the directors, and that's what we created. It's a communication tool. It was a guiding document that allows the mayor, council, directors, managers, all just to kind of communicate and see where we're going. And then I added a financial component to it. Is it fundable? I'll do the best I can with some assumptions, i.e. the 3% taken every single year. So that's the history of the item. It started in 2015 with the request of Tammy, and then we moved forward in 2016 with a committee or group to build the software solution. So hopefully that answers the question, Councilmember Strader.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Strader.
Yeah, that's really helpful. You know, I like to just ask you your opinion. Do you feel that following this process has contributed to our success? Do you think that it has been a useful tool? Do you think it's used to its full capability? Have you heard from directors? You know, do they like using it? I mean, obviously it's better than, you know, I don't think we ever want a director just scratching their wish list of forthcoming items on a napkin. God forbid they leave and then no one knows where we need to go. So yeah, just what feedback you've had and what's your opinion?
Sure. Councilmember Strader, so with this plan in place, I believe it has been a success for the city of Meridian. The amount of growth that we've had, I don't think we're in this financial position just by luck. We've been grateful of the interest of this valley, that people want to develop and move here. Again, that's been a great benefit for us. But to be where we're at today, I don't think it's just by luck. We created 2 fire stations in 1 year. I don't know how many other districts, agencies, valleys, areas would open up 2 stations in one time. We luckily had the foresight that they wanted to do this. So we started multiple years ahead, putting funds away so that when the 2 stations opened up, we had the revenue sources in place. Without this planning tool, we would not have been able to set aside $1 million here, 500,000 here, 250,000 here. So when the keys turned on, I had the revenue sources to open up 2 stations at one time. So again, I believe examples like that has assisted us to manage our revenue streams, our expenses. Again, Robert's had many different or difficult discussions with his fellow directors going, hey, we have 2 stations opening up. I know, Steve, you want this. I know, David, you want this. But fortunately, we need to make sure we save because we committed to these 2 stations. So again, I think it's helped Robert, and again, have discussions with his directors. Not good one. I mean, sometimes they're bad, sometimes they're good because it's frustrating because we have to do some prioritization. So to answer the question, directors' input, good and bad. Obviously, if you put it in, you hope that you get it, but sometimes we have to say, we have to push it out because we have other priorities in line because of X, Y, and Z. So, I mean, I think at the end of the day, my conversations with directors, it's a tool that is supported by them because it gives them a centralized location to submit their request, don't lose sight of it, communicates to anybody who reads the documents that this is where we need to go, or we believe we need to go to meet the city strategic plan for the city of Meridian for the next 5 to 10 years. And you do have some directors here if you want to hear from them directly, but that's my engagement with them. I met with all the council members last calendar year and asked those questions. All of them were supportive of some planning tool in place so that we could communicate with you and the council and the citizens that this is what the city is planning to spend their money on. Obviously, we do an annual budget because we have to figure out what that year needs. But those are the interactions that I've had with the CFP and the needs of the CFP. I know you had a few questions in there. I apologize if I didn't get them all.
That's Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Strader.
Oh, that's okay. I think we're getting there. I do think it might be valuable to hear from individual directors at some point in the meeting. You know, so reading through the financial structure, policy, and process document, and just to share a little bit my own view, and I want to let everyone share their opinion. So I'll kind of start off, and then I'll let everyone else ask questions and share opinions. But I think that having a long-term planning process is really important. Having everybody on the same page. I believe that I don't think we need changes to our policies, but I actually think an enhancement to our process might be worth considering. In the second to the last paragraph on the first page, it discusses that the CFP will begin in August and will conclude in January with a final report submitted to council. I took a look at the 2024 to 2020, well, it would be all the way to 2034, technically, 10-year financial plan. I think one of the biggest challenges we have is this is a moving target and it's always changing. But I do think it's important to pick a point in time during the year when we say, okay, we're closing our report for submission to council, that's submitted to the council. And I think it would be valuable to hear from each department director some highlights on material items that are coming in the next 5 years. I actually think that I don't think that requires a change in our policy, but I think that could require just a change in our practice. I think that would help us to understand the long-term needs of the city and ensure that we're all on the same page for funding those items going forward. So that's one thing I wanted to mention. And then in addition to that, I think each council liaison during the base budget process could certainly, if there are detailed questions in the CFP, could go into those. But I think it's just helpful best practice for us to all get on the same page early, because the CFP, in theory, should be informing the budgeting process. So anyway, that was the piece that I wanted to say. So I'm in the camp of, I like our existing policy. I think it's very valuable. I think we should follow it. And I actually think that we should enhance our processes around it from a council perspective. So I've talked a lot. I'll let other people ask questions and chime in.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton.
I'll go next briefly, and while council members think about any questions or comments they've got. Todd, the discussion also from 2016 and the genesis of this tool to then the 2019, which I've referenced the ordinance passed by the city to memorialize the process you've described. Your analogy of turning a ship, if I seem to recall, the purpose behind us adopting that policy that we've shared is to ensure we're utilizing this tool relatively consistently. Is that a correct summary?
Councilmember Borton, correct. It was to establish a consistency, so when you did have change of the 7, you would have a policy that we would still have a financial stability policy that we would still adhere to regardless of the 7 sitting in your seats at the moment. That is the reason we put that in there.
Okay. Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton.
I think the policy as it exists just needs to be adhered to and followed. Even though we may be behind, it's a critical tool for what we're going to see in June. And I've talked to the mayor about it and probably a lot of council members about it. So my hope is that we continue to adhere to it. I've raised concerns in other matters when we don't adhere to policy. If we don't follow it, it scares the heck out of me. I think it's irresponsible, to be blunt. So I recall the 2019, the decision to enact this is so pivots are very gradual and they do not turn abruptly when council members change. And when we're all not part of this process and someone else is up here, we're utilizing the same structure. I think that is what creates a long-term success for the city. So the 5-year kind of running, balancing that you've got as a tool, a guide, illustrative guide, utilizing the revenue assumptions that you have been doing has been fruitful. It also helps answer the very difficult questions. I mean, as a council member, I think of, most recently it came up with safer grant and fire personnel, and you've got a bubbled labor cost that's coming within those 5 years. So it's the elephant in the room. Let's talk about it. It impacts every single department. So drop that in. And I want to see in 2028 how we're going to facilitate onboarding labor costs and who amongst, how do we make that work? Let's see that before 2028. So that's just one small example of how it the tool is probably more necessary now than ever before. And that's true regardless of who's sitting up here. So I'm hopeful that when I see the budget calendar that you've displayed, you've got current, present, correct me if I'm wrong, discussions with directors right now to update, not starting from scratch, but kind of update the existing CFP, move things around the year so then these next 5 years appear to be balanced based upon your revenue assumptions and make all the pieces and parts fit. That then coming to the mayor and then being presented to us. So I think Councilwoman Strader's idea of having directors, describe how things fit over the next 5 years is a good one. I agree. I don't think it's a policy change, but maybe a practice how we can help educate council better to see how it all fits. So I love the policy. I just want to have us follow it and enhance some practice with it. So.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
Todd, I recall a tool that was used well before this. And I don't remember the name. But before this, we used to submit, I know we did for the police department, I'm sure everyone in the city did, our best prediction for the 5, 10, 15-year mark of what our needs were going to be. Personnel, equipment, replacements, but it wasn't as formalized as what this became. At the time we were doing that, it was a guideline. It was not a strict adherence because we knew things were going to happen during that time period, which were going to drastically change what reality was versus what we were putting on those lists. Whether it was technology changes, vehicle changes, personnel requests would go up or go down. We would have to shuffle them, and we didn't set priorities on those. Those were just what our department thought we needed. And at that time, it was just so that it could all go to finance and you could gather all this data and look at this and determine, oh my gosh, are we going to be able to fund this? And that was before this tool ever came about. Where I see this as a 5-year tool now, how often during the year does it get modified? Is the input from directors still once a year, or is there a different time in the year where they give mid-year updates because of things that might have happened or changed? For example, the grant coming in.
Councilman Overton, the CFP is updated once a year per the detailed timeline that council members Strader pointed out to, August to January. Then once we have that, we submit that as our official document. This is just the roadmap, our guide of what's going to drive most likely the next fiscal year's budget. And then in the month of February or in the month of March, with that document, the mayor will start working with the directors, go, all right, let's put the 25, in this case, we're going to say fiscal 25 because that's the process we're in. Let's build the 25 budget. Mayor would ask us to submit to him what are all the requests in the CFP for fiscal 25, and I submit it to him so we can start balancing it. At that moment in time, we'll then start making changes because if there's 37 requests in there, but only 18 can be funded, the mayor needs to then start working, okay, of these 38, I need to get it down to 18 because I can't fund it. We need to make more changes in it. We're not going to leave them all in 25. We're going to start moving what we believe will represent the fiscal 25 budget and then just push out the items to a year at some point in time. We just need to get it out of the 25 so that when we have the 25 budget balanced, the CFP is representing what we believe is 25. So when I put it in, when I run the report for your budget, 25 should be pretty darn close to what's inside the budget in detail. So we do update it twice a year. The August that Councilmember Strader referenced for that timeline that we're building it, we're it's updating the data. And then one more time in March and April when Robert and the directors, we do the balancing act for the one fiscal year at that moment in time. So those are the two edits that we normally do. Again, the 5-year balancing act, that is kind of intermingled within the first process. I'll start working with the mayor and try to balance it. But only really 2 times a year do we update that document with one official publication sent to you and then the second official publication in our budget book document for the citizens to read.
Mayor, follow up?
Councilman Overton.
And maybe I missed this, and correct me if I'm wrong. Is there as I see us doing a 5-year plan, we're really not putting priorities on those items. You're listing the items requested by the different directors throughout the city.
Councilmember Overton, we actually do request the directors to prioritize their requests so that when we present it to the mayor has an idea of, if there's 17 requests, he has an idea of what Chief Bloom would like prioritized. So when we're doing the balancing act, we don't grab number 17, put that number 1. We hold on, try to get his number 1 first, and then work down the list. You know, Lorelei McVeigh may have 27. We'll try to get her top 15 first. So we do ask our directors to prioritize so that there is some kind of direction for Robert, the mayor, to work off of. And then we have a funding prioritization after that as well. But the directors do submit a prioritization to us for their items.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Taylor.
Thank you, Todd. I appreciate the presentation, and I've enjoyed kind of learning a bit more about how this tool's been working, and it's been very fascinating and interesting. But I do have a question. We've talked a little bit, and Councilwoman Strader mentioned sort of enhancing the process and utilizing it as a tool, which I fully agree with. Can you tell me, do the directors have a formalized process that's consistent across departments by which they identify what they want to put on the CFP, or is it sort of like whatever process works for them and however they identify it, they'll kind of park it there and say, we know these are the needs we anticipate? Because I'd like to know if we're going to sort of enhance this process of using this tool to be a really effective tool. For me, I'd like to know, when these items are being developed, is there consistency by which they're being developed across departments?
Councilmember Taylor, from a internal process in each division, I won't be able to step into that shoe. I apologize. I know that we give direction to the directors to start working with their subject matter experts to build what they need as it pertains to meeting the city's strategic plan. And whether or not there's any specific direction that maybe Chief Bloom does compared to, our CIO or our, city attorney. Again, I think those are internal practices and processes that they've developed for what works best for their team. I don't step into those shoes, but I would say the mayor and I, we both give direction. Please present to us what you believe you need that meets the city's needs over the next 5 to 10 years.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Taylor.
Just another question, and maybe because I'm still learning some of the processes, but how binding are the decisions that we make? I understand that we can't anticipate 2, 3, 4 years down the road that well. I know that when we're looking at setting the budget, it's that year, and we look at what the circumstances are that year to balance the budget. But when we, you have the date in August, and then in February when we're going through that balancing process, how binding is the CFP in terms of identifying the priorities we're going to fund?
Councilmember Taylor, great question. I appreciate it. The CFP is supposed to be, I think someone says it's a liquid document. It's a tool, it's a guide. At no time in the development of this document was it, or is it, to imply guaranteed funding, or imply to you that we expect you to fund this, or imply that if it gets in the CFP, it's guaranteed. It is a moving document. It's fluid. Things change. A couple years ago, we had an incident in the news, and mayor stepped up to me the next day and said, "Hey, Todd, I need 6 SROs tomorrow." And I think we're on budget workshop number 2. So we need to be fluid. So no, there's never an intent of any expectations that these are guaranteed funded or guaranteed funding dollars to any of these projects. It is a tool to give guidance, and let's work off of that. I guess to follow up, I'll apologize. The guarantees when we do the annual budget. That is when you know if something gets funded.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Little Roberts.
Mr. Mayor, Todd, thank you for you and your team and all the hard work that goes into all of this. Since our budget is, in my view, probably the biggest thing we do
And can get a little closer, just so.
every year, sorry. Having been on the council, then off for 4 years and then back, it was really nice to be able to see the policy in place and that we're still, may have some tweaks, but are very much tracking on what seemed to be a very efficient way of doing the budget. So I'm just glad that our policy is still in place, even if we do some tweaks to it, that it's great to be looked at as one of the examples of how to handle a city budget. And I think we should be very proud of that as we continue always to work on it and do better. So thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
I don't have a whole lot more to add except for maybe 2 points that I think that are really important for me to share. And first goes back to Todd's comment about nothing being certain until we approve the budget. And I'll be honest, I don't think that was always the case. And I really want to commend our directors and our employees and our mayor for being disciplined to say, these are things that we as leaders think that we need, but it's not an expectation that just because it has landed in the CFP, that it will then translate to the budget. I think that's an important piece. And the other piece, and I commend, I think IT has developed this tool for staff, directors, and council. You know, I look at it as a place of we're informed, right? We're being informed what council or what staff need, what directors need. And Councilmember Strader, you hit the nail on the head. We as liaisons should be spending more time in this and talking with our directors about their CFP requests. We need to level up our professionalism and being better informed about what the department has, not just for their budget requests for this year, but thinking forward. And so I appreciate that recommendation. I made a note for myself to, when I meet with the chief down the road, that we're talking about the CFP, because when you go in there and you look, there are items that are in there that were supposed to be funded in years past that are still on there. I want to understand, why are they still on there? Why weren't they funded? Why were they moved? And so I think that's an important place for us to all spend a little more time in the CFP, particularly as we're meeting with our department director.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
just a last comment to finance. I couldn't tell you how much I appreciate you and your team and everything they've done, how you crunch all the numbers and put everything together from all the different directors and divisions within this city. Would it be correct when we're looking at a budget and we see things that keep going up, that sometimes what we're seeing is items that were on the previous years and keep getting pushed? If it was on 24s, it got pushed to 25. If it was on 25s, it might get pushed to 26, as departments are continuing to set and reset their priorities. And sometimes it does cause a little bit of confusion, but it's because directors are having to look at, well, my priorities may have changed because of certain circumstances that have gone on. And that's what causes some of that change, and you see the same thing looking at it. I know when I look that there's certain big ticket items on there in FY 28 and 29. And the first thing I do is I think, those might get pushed, right? I know I see them there. There's no obligation by council that we've got to fund that. The first thing I look is I go, oh, I remember some of these things. I'm going to bet that's going to get pushed, just because that's the way things go. It's the needs, but in reality, when we get down to brass tacks, some of those big items are going to get pushed because they won't be a high enough need to be a high enough priority overall for the city. Is that a fair statement?
Councilmember Overton, extremely fair. The political, that's why we do an annual budget. Many other agencies do a every other year budget. We have dynamic changes. We're a growing community. We don't have the luxury of waiting every 2 years to have these discussions. A couple weeks ago or a month ago, Jenny Field sent you an email about the state decided to increase the Percy contributions, $600,000. That changes Robert's CFP dramatically. That's $600,000 that I do not get to give to him to work with his fellow directors. So yeah, pivot just like that. So we have things like that. We have to be able to pivot. Things might get pushed back from 25 to 26, now 26 to 27, because it wasn't in our control. Somebody else decided on a rate increase. So you nailed it. Things influence. We will adjust and prioritize based on that year's needs. And sometimes things do bump.
And Mr. Lewis, I'm just going to, we're going to be following the policy and updating the words. It's the Finance Department, CFP, just so we can get the terminology correct moving forward. But the question came up, my thoughts on it and whatnot. And really, since I became mayor, I was told, make a balance. That's it. That's 95% of what I'm asked to do each year is to balance the CFP. Not talk, yeah, I can talk about inputs, but really we leave it to the directors to put in the things that they think that they need. And I'm told to go balance it, which the only way to balance it is to move things from one year to the next and so on. And are there some value judgments in there? There might be some from the director, from myself, from the team. That's kind of how that process works in a lot of ways. But that's been my role. In some cases, it was to not put things in the butt. Before the chief got here, there was a thing in the CFP to go rebuild Fire Station 1. But I didn't see that as a priority, and I said, I don't see how that makes sense based upon the other needs of the department that we're going to go rebuild a functioning building, especially when we're talking about building it like 2 blocks away from its current location on another road. So yes, there were some things in there. From my perspective, the conversations over the last couple of years is not about what's in it, it's what's not in it. It's what moved. Those are the bigger questions that I'm hearing, and you're still going to have those questions under this policy. That's still going to be the primary driver. I don't think you're going to have too many questions or complaints about what you see in a balanced CFP. You're always going to have questions about, well, this department asked for these positions and they're not in there. Why are they not in there? Why are they out here in 10 years down the road? The answer is just going to be, that's what we did to balance it. That will be the response because that's the reality. It's not because I don't like the positions that are being asked for. It's not that, the position that Dave wants is any less important than the position that, Bill wants. There are some value conversations and some of those are had with council and some of them are not before the budget time, to be realistic about it. So some of the proposed changes that I made was not to make it be balanced. Let the departments put in there all the things that they want every given year so that you see the full gamut. So you can make those value judgments to say, well, that's what they asked for and this is what the mayor put in the budget. So what gives from that standpoint? That way it's not, well, what I heard about this and I don't even see it in the next 5 years, from that standpoint. So making it functional versus not. If you want it to be the same way, I've read the policy. I have the policy. Todd's going to make those decisions. He's going to balance it. I'm going to confirm that it's financially balanced. But it's not going to be reflective necessarily of what gets brought into the budget if you're asking for my priorities in a given year or my conversation with the council on your priorities. It will be Todd doing a process with the directors to create a balanced 5-year CFP per this. I don't know how valuable that is to everyone, but that's the way the policy reads. It's what it is. It says it very clearly. It says mayor's responsible for approving the annual CFP. They're responsible for developing it. Very clear in policy. So we can follow the policy and we're fine with that. Just know that what you see may or may not look like what comes forward in terms of the budget when we bring forward enhancements, at least from my perspective. But you'll see it, you'll have what they said. I personally think it's a better tool to say, let you see everything that the departments are asking for, to be honest with you. I think that has more value for you in that confines. Doesn't mean that, we're ever going to get away from a 5-year process, and you can look forward 3 years and see what's on the horizon. But there, as Todd mentioned, there are things in this that have assumptions about a 3% annually. I know several council members up here don't necessarily agree with that philosophy, but you're asking for a CFP to be approved with that input. I don't think it's part of your policy. It's not directed in this policy that that's what it needs to be. So if you look back over the last 4 years, I think we're at a 2.1% roughly over the last, each year over the last, in the last 4 years, 2.1 averaged out. 1 year 0, 1 year 3, the numbers kind of come into that. But you're still creating a CFP that's not based upon financial realities of what the city has done over the last 15 years historically, just like you may question the revenue assumptions, in terms of maybe they're not enough in that. And that's part of the give and take in it. So I will do whatever council wants in terms of if you want to just follow this policy, we will follow the policy and you'll get it. And if you want to enhance that policy and come forward and hear from the directors on it, that is great. I think it works better as a communication tool and let you see, again, I would love you all to see everything I see all the time with all the requests. I think that would be so beneficial, more so than seeing a balanced 5-year CFP, to be honest with you. I really do. Because I think that you will then understand what the departments are truly wanting and asking for. But I'm told to go balance and go make it work on paper, which just means, well, we got to move these 4 things that this department asked for in this year out 5 years to make a balance. And does that help you when that happens? I don't know. Each one of you probably have a different viewpoint on that, but that is the challenge of what it is. But again, I will make sure the executive branch delivers whatever is required under policy to the legislative branch so that you guys can do what you would like with it at that point in time, which, if you want to do more, you may have to change the policy if there's more that you want to do to approve it yourselves or to dive deeper. But we will come and people can present pre-budget stuff. We used to do that all the time. That council used to say, take it away. We can bring it back and have the directors all come in and give an overview about what's in, maybe they give an overview about what Todd moved from their CFP that they asked for in this next year or their next 5 years. And you can hear that from them themselves at that time. So it's not the budget conversation about what changed in the CFP. So I'm happy to provide answer any questions you may have about my comments, but I just, I don't want to get stuck up in like, well, why is this not in here and where did this go? If you're not willing to let it be in there for people to see it. If you're putting on myself or Todd to move it, then part of it should be you need to understand it's been moved to make a balance. And that should be sufficed from that standpoint, not because it's just a whim that I don't think that the police department knows what they're talking about when it comes to the things they're asking for. So happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilwoman Schrader.
Yeah, I hear 2 different pieces. So I want to kind of reflect on both pieces that I'm hearing. So the first piece I'm hearing is a piece regarding, and it's because of the nature of the report. So the report changes, but we have CFP requests that go in and then there's a balancing process. And I agree that when it was created, it was meant to be a communication tool. And so I think, I guess I'm a little confused as to why when we received the balanced CFP, there could not be a description or a discussion of, for example, we were presented with these 25 items. Here are the material items that got moved. I guess I am confused as to why that could not be part of the CFP presentation in February. I think it would be very educational for all of us. Frankly, that would save me time because every year I have to go through my own process to do a comparison of what things get moved out of the CFP. So I think there could be an enhancement there. But I guess more concerning is, I hear there's a frustration a little bit. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but this is finances CFP and that you will follow the policy. I am concerned about that. I think it's important that you go through that process of prioritization with the department directors. I think we've ended up in a successful place because we have followed that policy. I think adding additional information to council to give us context of here were the things that didn't make it in the CFP and here's why. I think that could only help all of us. But I'm a little bit worried that we've opened up this conversation and it's frustrating. So there's this question of who owns the CFP. And ultimately, we all own the CFP. We all own the success of the city. If, for some reason you're unwilling to use the process, I'm certainly willing, and I'm sure everyone would be, to step up to use the process that we need to use to help meet the needs of the city from a long-term planning perspective. But I think I would encourage maybe us to give it some more thought, because I feel like we could have the balanced CFP presented with information about, here were all the requests and here's how they were prioritized and here's what was moved out. And I think having that context could only help everybody. But maybe I'm not hearing you correctly. I don't want to put words in your mouth, so.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
I appreciate, I think what you're trying to do is also create good lanes for executive branch and legislative branch, and I'm one that always really appreciates that. And so that's at least maybe where some of my questions are coming from is, our goal is, well, you bring a budget, ultimately we own it together as a team. And so your budget includes 10 apples, and I think we don't need 10 apples, we need 5 oranges. I want to be respectful to our process. How do you want council to operate then if 5 apples or if 10 apples and 5 oranges are in the CFP? In order to make it balanced, you pick the 10, but council thinks differently. How would you like that process to play out? Because we want to be efficient, but I also want to be respectful of your role in bringing forth a budget that takes all the input from the directors in. And I want to make sure that we're doing our part as well, and not just, and I think I've been guilty of this, is just reacting to a budget that a mayor has brought, as opposed to working collaboratively to develop a budget. So I don't know if you've got any thought around that or recommendations for us that we can bring a budget that is collaborative in nature.
I think bringing a budget is different than balancing the CFP.
Agreed.
And I think that, just staying focused on the CFP component is, if I haven't been speaking with council throughout the budget process to talk about the priorities, and that I haven't done my job. And if you have priorities and you haven't shared them with me, you haven't done your job. I would say it goes that direction in that context. Now, ultimately, am I responsible for delivering a budget? Yes. Do you have to prove what's in that budget? No, you don't. But hopefully I've done enough of my engagement with council to help put together something that people want and are willing to be supportive of. I think that's been kind of the conversation over the last few years on what percent do we take? That's part of the conversation. Where does council feel like the community is and where they are and what are they willing to do? And then what do you fund with that? That's all part of that conversation, that dialogue. Sometimes it may be different, maybe just, nope, I'm going to deliver a 3% and it is what it is, and we'll go for as much as we want. And there's not a lot of questions in that context. But, is the CFP the defining place for that conversation? Again, not according to policy. It's really not. Again, this is not a document that council adopts. This is not a document that, it's just transmitted. It is what it is when it comes to you in that context. And again, I've been asked by good council president to follow the policy. I will follow the policy as it's written, if we're happy with it. If you want to make it be something more or better or different, then we can have a conversation about changing the policy to reflect what people want out of it, and I'm fine with that. But if I'm going to be held accountable to moving things in or out, or why is this not here, I'm willing to stand behind my budget that's delivered to you on what's in there every time. Balancing the CFP is just an academic process in a lot of ways. Yes, it can help present long, big things, but it's not, in my opinion, the end all be all, because as mentioned, things change. It is an academic process. So that's where we are from my perspective. I would change this personally, but it's a adopted council policy, and what I've heard from council is they like the policy. So we will follow the policy. If there's more that we want to enhance to it, we can do that.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Taylor.
Quick question. Have you found any value in balancing the CFP in those first 5 years as you've kind of gone through the exercise of what you think are priorities as you work with your directors? Because this is kind of an interesting discussion for me in determining when the budget's submitted, and I hear what has been said, but these are your priorities that you've kind of worked with the departments to identify, or is the budget that's presented has more council input in identifying the budget? So maybe a couple of questions there, and you've kind of already spoken to it a little bit, but I kind of would like to hear your response a little bit. Maybe you kind of already did, but do you find value in the policy of balancing the CFP when determining city priorities?
I find the value in sometimes having the conversations with some of the directors about what they're asking for is being unreasonable based upon the full evaluation of our situation. The one-offs, and do I find value in saying we got to move this position from here to 2 years down the road? No. That's not valuable because I know they need it now and they want it now. But the only way that based upon where you can fund it, you've got to do that. And I also understand that the revenue that we're basing that on is not necessarily realistic or real because there's so many other inputs which are not really there. So again, is it a conflict conversation with the director when you're balancing the CFP and pushing out their priorities to make that? And then you go through the process again in the budget, and we've pulled stuff forward when we moved it out in the CFP and brought it back in, when you have the revenue to make that happen. So conversations maybe have some value. The balancing process, I don't know that I see the value in that. Todd, sure. I understand why he sees value, and especially in looking at some of these larger things. And really, I'm talking about personnel. The capital side of this conversation is not really even something that is generally discussed with the directors because it's replacements, first and foremost. It's stuff that's already been put into, we're collecting impact fees for a facility or station or a park. So they're the ones that are projecting out when are the impact fees going to come online. They're trying to guess when development's going to occur in that context. Then they'll look at the person that comes in that context. And a park is a great example. Okay, when is all those things going to line up? And you need the person that year if you're going to bring the park on. So that's going to maybe trump everything else, or you don't build the park because you can't necessarily bring it on and don't have an ongoing operational. So there are points and times where it makes sense. There's other points and times where, I don't know that the value is truly there when you're just moving people around to a year. It doesn't really truly reflect when you might need them.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Schrader.
you're saying that it's academic, and I kind of look at it, just to offer a different perspective, sort of like sailing a ship, right? Unfortunately, if you're sailing a ship now, a ship with a sail, the ship's tack. And so part of the problem is, you're going to deviate and you need to steer your ship back on track. And so you have to have that, kind of ultimate long-term goal to sail your ship. I don't think that a large corporation or a city is much different. I think having the long-term financial plan is critical because that is, in fact, the basis upon which the next budget is created. Todd is not going to invent the next budget from the ground floor. He's not going to invent it. I could be wrong, but he's not going to make it up himself from year to year. He's going to use the CFP as a basis upon which to create the next budget, because if we don't do that, and if we don't feel that you have buy-in in that process, I think the danger is that from year to year, I will not have that trust that we're adhering to a long-term vision. And it could just be simple stability in terms of the balancing and the priorities. But if we don't have that, then I become concerned about why we're making decisions from year to year. This year is going to be a great example because we had an opportunity and a problem come up with the SAFER grant. We took advantage of that opportunity / problem. And now the CFP is more important than ever because I want to see how we're going to get to a normalized level where we're able to fund those positions on an ongoing basis. And I don't think it's like we're moving headcount out a couple of years. I think it's that we should collectively be thoughtful about what year we move that headcount out to. And I don't think it hurts to have that back and forth and have that communication. And if you want more involvement from the council to support you in that process, I am willing to do that with you. I think we could take as much time as we need to go through the CFP together and ensure that it's balanced. If you view that your role is a perfunctory approval, I disagree. But I'm just speaking for myself, but I think I'm very willing to roll up my sleeves and get into the details and understand the priorities and make that happen. So we have a different perspective, I guess, on the importance of the CFP, but I think it's very important that we have a long-term plan and that the mayor has buy-in on that process. And if not, I'm willing to I have lots of buy-in.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borden.
fruitful discussion. I think we'll kind of bring this to a conclusion. This didn't come up on the agenda to make ultimate decisions, but to try and highlight, I guess, people's perspectives and give everyone a voice to collectively share their thoughts of how this budget building process works and how this policy works. Certainly disagreements are present on how this is or isn't utilized as a tool, but we appreciate finance and all the directors doing what they're in the midst of doing. I guess, Mr. Mayor, if it's okay, we've got some directors here. Did anybody want to share an example, anecdote while they're here about the CFP? Is that okay? That
Absolutely.
would be great. Thanks. We appreciate you coming, and you're all doing the laboring work to update it.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, happy to be here in front of you talking about the comprehensive financial plan today. So from the IT department standpoint, we use this as a planning tool for various technology needs, planning needs, replacement needs. But on the flip side, we also have an opportunity to see what other departments are planning for over their next 5 to 10 years. From a personnel standpoint, from a technology standpoint, if they're adding computers, all those types of things, which helps us understand better where we need to be to support them and help them. So very valuable tool. Also helps us with planning for personnel needs so that we understand where we need to be at. Because as you all know, we are a growing community and our staff, our technology, our facilities, they've all changed a lot over the last 10 years. So it's been super helpful for us to be able to project out and know where we need to be. As you know, technology changes a lot. And so it is a moving target for us. We're always making adjustments and changing because that's the nature of technology and that's the nature of what we do. But it has been a very valuable tool for us. So just want to give my 2 cents.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Mayor and Council. So from Public Works perspective, very important planning tool. If we choose not to use a balanced, CFP, we still have to do that in Public Works for our rate collecting. Generally, the Public Works side of the CFP is not usually discussed too much. It's usually the general fund side, but I do have some inputs in that. But I think, you guys hit on some really good points that we need to have common consensus of the items in the CFP are not a guarantee. They're not a guarantee for the year you put them in. They're not a guarantee to even ever happen, but it's our best guess, our best placeholder. I think us as a director's team and working with the mayor, we do have those discussions about when things move. The mayor doesn't do that in a vacuum because we all know that if you add something or you change the price of something, other things have to give. And so I think the really important part is that we don't do that without everybody understanding. So, one of the ideas, and I think it's very important that it's flexible. Things change. It's our best guess. The only year that's really, really nailed down is, the upcoming year. The rest, there's a lot of guessing. The further out it gets, the fuzzier that gets. But I think, maybe a couple of things that could help from my perspective is, and I don't know if the tool is able to do this, but a way to track those changes when things move, a way to put in notes, if you're going to move something, a note gets attached to it as to why it was moved, or, is there a way to put the first year it was put in and the original budget, and then how those change over time, just so people understand why it moves over time, because usually it's for a good reason. It's usually not just on a whim, or there's usually valid reasons that it comes in. I do think also important that everybody understands the assumptions that go into it, that it is built on that 3% increase. And when that doesn't happen, there's resulting impacts. Things have to be reduced and moved out and pushed out. So those are just, I guess, my opinions from Public Works. It's a very important tool for us. We utilize it for a lot of things, and would definitely advocate for it needing to be balanced and be a collaborative process.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman McCaver.
I know we are trying to wrap up, but Lorelei brings up, and you brought up as well, I think at least, something has perked my interest, and so maybe it's a question for Todd. The driving force behind factoring in the 3% as an assumption when balancing the CFP, when, to the mayor's point, the city hasn't on average taken 3%, are we creating added challenges for us as a city and as a department when there are different financial decisions that are being made about what percentage increase to take that is contrary to what you are using to balance the CFP?
Councilmember Cavanagh, like the mayor said, over the last 5 years, we have not taken the 3% other than one time. So again, I would agree that if we're going to utilize this tool as a balancing act, could we adjust it? If you look at the previous 10 years, we took 3% all but 2 years. So again, it all depends which timeline we want to refer to. Again, I'm always going to stand on any soapbox and say, take the 3% every year. That is what's needed for the city to continue to meet our employees' needs. I guess if that's my way of advertising or marketing it to you, is that I believe that the financial management tool is in the best interest to be forecasted with the 3%. That's one avenue I have, but if we wanted to make it 2.1, I can adjust it to 2.1, 1.3, any document or any number that you ask me to. I still believe the 3% is the right decision for the city going forward based on our growth projections. So again, the document is a financial representation of my opinion.
Yeah.
And I can change it to an opinion of someone else if you wish to, but it does come from our office, and the office does have a 3%. So to answer, it really is just, I guess, my opinion to you, or my suggestion to you of what I believe the business district or business decision should be for the city. But I can adjust it, yes.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
and I think this maybe could be a part 2 conversation. While our good CFO and I have went rounds and rounds and our differing philosophies around this issue, I do place a high value as a subject matter expert when Mr. Lavoie continually recommends the 3%. But I also think building a CFP assuming 0% gives us more flexibility, particularly for some of these challenging needs. Now, if the CFP is, again, academic, then we could do all sorts of different numbers, and it would be a fun conversation, maybe around adult beverages and snacks, that we could talk through all of this. But up here, I think that we've got to at least continue to follow some consistency. And if it is going to be 3%, that's fine. But I do think that could create more opportunities for challenging conversations down the way. So,
Councilman Cavanagh, I'll just, a 0% CFP means no positions in the CFP whatsoever.
yep.
Very easy to balance that CFP
This.
in 5 years. So somewhere within there is maybe the answer to your discussion is maybe we just go to a 0, it can be balanced and you just list out all the personnel needs by department thereafter each year and you can see. That way it's balanced and you can see everything that's being asked. But that's what a 0% would deliver, I think, pretty close. You're never going to know like the 1 year, the 1 year outlier where we got all that additional revenue, never would have been projected in the CFP to begin with in that context. But yes, you're 100% right. You change that number and you dramatically change what the CFP looks like and includes.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Taylor.
don't mean to belabor the conversation, but I'll just make this observation would be interesting to that point. As we're looking at the last 3 years of the budget and averaging a number out, I'd be curious if we'd look at what the city took in terms of the 3% or 2.1 or 1.6, whatever we took, and average that out over to give us a number. Might be an interesting exercise in terms of understanding that. That way you're taking kind of actions we've taken, sort of the temperament of the council, and factoring in those numbers. I'd be curious how that would inform that process instead of a default always 3% when we haven't always done that recently. I think that might be informative. I just put that out there as a consideration.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Board.
certainly a good follow-up, kind of next discussion on that. I know we've got strategic planning coming next. This is planning workshops, so more conversation on this. Mayor, I appreciate you providing your input. Some difficult conversations on how to use the tool. I will tell you, I think when the policy says it's 5 years balanced, we're following policy, that's great to hear. That's going to be the expectation that we'll see that. When it does say the mayor approves the CFP, I think that means you're on board. So as much collaboration and your agreement with it, that's how I read the word approving of it. And I hope that's the case. That's what takes place. So with that, more conversations, I guess, coming. CFP is underway. Thank you, Dave and Lorelei, for providing that input. I hadn't thought about the way the directors and departments look at each other's CFPs. That's also another added benefit to anticipate what's coming down the road. So as to the 3%, the second conversation, that's going to be an interesting one. That die is cast for many, many years. The money's been spent. I mean, your labor cost as a percentage of recurring revenue that ship has sailed, die is cast. So that'll be part 2 for this conversation. Anything further, Mayor, on this topic?
No.
Council? Okay, to be continued. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Next up is item 25, strategic plan update. Turn this over to Mr. Kuntz.
In person's always better. Just is.
It is. I love it.
It is.
Good evening. My name is Vincent Kuntz. I know some of you. I don't know others of you, but I hope to deliver a presentation on our 2021 to 2025 strategic plan tonight. And I helped create with City Council and our citizens our 2021 to 2025 strategic plan. I'm also in charge of our process improvement program for the city, and I also work on special projects at the mayor's office. So I'm happy to be in front of you tonight. So on the agenda, I got a couple updates for some new council members. Some of us that have been on here before, some of us have not. I want to make sure and kind of give a refresh on how the plan was created. Also an update by our focus areas on some of the work that was created in the plan, and then answering any questions you might have. So a brief history lesson. Our first strategic plan was created in 2016, and through 2020, which was a step in the right direction for a growing city. We learned a lot through the process. I came on in 2017, and part of my job was to move that plan forward and take some of those lessons learned into the new plan. We kind of learned about what worked, what didn't, and what the philosophy should be in a plan going forward, with the ultimate goal of achieving our vision, which is to being the West's premier community to live, work, and raise a family by 2035. Our strategic plan puts actions and deliverables to our vision and provides the community with a sense of direction and provides our leadership and staff with guiding principles to achieve their jobs and achieve results. Over the course of 2020, during COVID, we held meetings with our city council. We took input from our community partners, also got information from our citizen survey, which greatly informed what our priorities were in the strategic plan. We also took input from our partner agencies and to determine what kind of framework we should pursue in order to achieve that vision. We additionally took some insight from our staff and our leadership in the city, and we wanted to also provide a plan that's flexible. We talked about flexibility here in the previous conversation. We wanted to make sure our new plan was flexible so that they could achieve and we could achieve our community's vision. These themes that are on our slide represent what our community told us in 2020 that would be priorities, what they cared about through our citizen survey, and also what we heard from the newly elected officials and were some of the key building blocks that allowed our departments to create and execute the strategic plan. And I'm happy to answer any questions beforehand or after, just depending on how you want to roll with it. Some of those top concerns, which you see reflected in our current strategic plan, are public safety, transportation, growing responsibly. In addition, we also heard concerns in our citizen survey about a sense of community, economic growth, clean water, park services, and efficient use of tax dollars. And those were all represented in our 5-year strategic plan. Our council in 2020 was involved during the approval and adoption process, and they set and helped set the focus areas, which are the broad statements about what we'd like to achieve in the direction of the city and the work that we do. We also set goals, which outline the work we look to achieve over the next 5 years. And during that time period, we set that framework. Council adopted it in December of 2020 and set forth a framework in order for our departments to create strategies and tactics, which represent a lot of the work in the plan. Over the past 3 years, they have been working tirelessly on that plan. Now, some of the things that we do as departments and responsibilities we have, so the departments and the mayor are responsible for the day-to-day execution of the plan. I work with departments to review updates with the mayor and also ensure execution and then report back to our citizens and also city council on the progress of the plan. As a council body, your role is as a policy and budget maker is to ensure the direction of our city is furthering the goals of our strategic plan. And that was also part of the conversation we were just having about the CFP. The CFP is informed by the strategic plan. That should be, and mostly is, the things that we look to achieve in our CFP. The CFP confirms the goals in the strategic plan. And if needed, as a council body, you would update or approve any changes to the focus areas or goals if so desired. And as of right now, you haven't chosen to do that. Hopefully we don't have to again. But our citizens were also involved in the strategic plan through the ongoing citizen survey in 2022 and will be again this year in 2024. They help us show that direction and see how we're doing as in achieving our outcomes for the plan. We report progress and updates to City Council on a quarterly basis. I send you a memo and also provide you a presentation. The mayor is also committed to updating our community through his blogs, as well as our recently published annual report, which is structured around the focus areas of our strategic plan. It also provides an update to our community on some of the key achievements by focus areas. And like I said, it was just released recently, so that should be familiar with our strategic plan. Also wanted to highlight some of the key achievements that have happened over the past 2 years. Each one of these items represents some of the key achievements that have occurred since 2021 and represent one item at least from one of the 6 focus areas of the plan. On our Parks Department, they were hard at work this past year on the Parks Master Plan, Urban Forestry Plan, and Lakeview Golf Course. In addition, the parks down in South Meridian. And then those are important in outlining the future of our vibrant, sustainable community. The police and fire, you've obviously heard about, have achieved opening their fire stations and the Northwest Police Precinct. Our staff and partners have taken action to prioritize Linda Road overpass, and council has approved dollars to that end. Our commitment to transparency and improvement has taken shape with our commitment to the city website redesign and our My Meridian podcast, as well as some city code updates. We are emphasizing growing responsibly through our streetlight master plan, as well as our solid waste master plan. The Meridian Pedestrian Task Force also was important this past year, and we also did updates to our open space and amenities package for development. And I can confidently say that our departments have been working and on the outlined goals to achieve and support our vision. This is not cooperating. And typically what I do in this part is highlight some of the things that have happened in the past 6 months from July to January of this year. So as mentioned, as part of our commitment to keep City Council up to date, we regularly update you on the status of the plan. And if there are any major updates to the plan, this biannual execution update is that time to do so. So we take key actions that have occurred from each focus area: responsible growth, transportation and infrastructure, business and economic vitality, public health and safety, vibrant sustainable community, and government excellence. So I'll take you through a brief story of the past 6 months. So responsible growth. You recently saw the mixed-use comprehensive plan changes. Staff brought some of those to you. You also wanted to get a little bit more information from our public on that. So we're currently collecting some information from the public via social media. Under transportation infrastructure, in order to promote efficient movement through Meridian, we spent the last 2 years closely working with ACHD, ITD, and the development community to move construction forward on Linda Road overpass. We dedicated city funds. Recently, you heard we had the ITD Strategic Initiatives Grant approved, which will provide $4.3 million for the project. On pathways, in South Meridian near my house, we've also completed the Mary McPherson pathway, which you approved a budget amendment for, which I'm happy because we can actually get to that school. It's also an important connection point because some of those sidewalks don't exist, and it's going to improve a lot of great safety for our children in that area. In addition, several other projects on 5 Mile Pathway and segments on Locust Grove are also in progress. The Meridian Intersection and Pedestrian Safety Task Force was created in the past 6 months to analyze sidewalk and intersections in Meridian. They identified over 100 opportunities. A final report was delivered to City Council in October. The streetlight portion was submitted to bid, and city staff are currently working to discuss development projects for the FY25 budget in coordination with ACHD, West Data, and others. Under business and economic vitality and public health and safety, City Council recently approved a budget amendment and we started construction. I know you guys can see that out there on the Hunter Lateral relocation project. This was originally going to be completed by River Caddis for the Civic Block, but that project was recently terminated, but we are moving forward on that project. And that will help greatly with development in downtown. Under public health and safety, obviously one of our largest commitments to public safety was building, staffing, fire stations 7 and 8, along with the Northwest Police Precinct. These investments brought on new facilities, equipment, and more importantly, the personnel that will provide safety services to the community. These facilities also enable us to keep our officers and firefighters in that area of town, potentially reducing drive times and faster responses and use of their resources. Under Vibrant Sustainable Community and Government Excellence, Discovery Park Phase 2 was another huge project and was a major part of the strategic plan. We enjoy it currently. My daughters enjoy it. And they're really anxious to use the bike park. South Meridian's Regional Park took a huge leap forward with the 3 new softball fields, tennis courts, pickleball, and a large teen area. We'll also have that bike park and pump track. And all of this came in ahead of schedule and on budget. Work's continuing with the connections to Discovery Park, which is originally part of that. So with Eagle Road and Lake Hazel's intersection just now starting. The golf course also saw some renovations and upgrades to continue to provide a premier resource for our community. The clubhouse upgrades are currently being worked on, and then council approved upgrades for the restroom facilities this year, which I hope to enjoy soon. So the first action plan also for Meridian under the age-friendly AARP program was one of those partnerships we had. It was completed, and staff's going to be working on implementing some of the goals from that AARP age-friendly community. In government excellence, Mayor Simison has been working through on the My Meridian podcast, which is important engagement with the community. We spent the past 2 seasons focusing on officials and agencies, and we're recently moving into our community partners, which include the Meridian Chamber, the Senior Center, and others are now in progress. So in our Innovation Academy, which I hold near and dear to my heart, we've been working on continuous improvement projects, teaching our employees how to implement and reduce waste in their workplace. Over the past year, we completed 7 projects totaling over 1,000 hours of work. Finance, building, human resources, and one other did a project. And we also trained 37 employees during the year on process improvement techniques. We look to build on that success this year and throughout 2024. And that's my summary. If you have any questions, happy to answer them.
Thank you, Vincent. Council, any questions? All right. Councilman Cavanagh.
Plan goes through the end of 2025. Don't strike me as the guy that waits till, January 1 of 2026 to start thinking about the next iteration. So I'm not asking you to forecast or, give us a big presentation, but maybe give council a little flavor. What are the things that you're thinking about as you're talking to stakeholders, directors, employees? What are the things that are starting to percolate that you're thinking about that we should also be thinking about as we look to the future?
Members of council, Councilman Cavanagh, one thing that I think we've learned as this plan's gone forward is, obviously there's some flexibility needed with the plan, and we continue to need that. But I think aligning the priorities, I think you guys mentioned it earlier, making sure that our priorities are aligned, there is a component in the CFP that talks about, which focus area does this priority align with. So making sure that as we're moving forward, that we utilize that opportunity and, hey, we're going to need resources for this. We're going to need budget items for this. We're going to need to look forward 5 years. And I think the other thing we're also that connection piece, making sure that in the next plan and in this current plan, we have those connection pieces to the comprehensive plan and to all of our other documents that are associated with the things we do and the priorities we put forward. And same thing with Mayor Simison and as a council body, what are your priorities as elected officials to inform this new plan? What are you hearing from our citizens? So in some ways, I want to say that, I want to come to you with those priorities, but as elected officials as well, I want to hear and know, what are your priorities? Where do you think we should be going? Where does Mayor Simison think we should be going? And, putting those priorities down to paper and having those collaborative sessions, I think are very important. Speaking to when we might start kind of thinking about what that next plan iteration is, I anticipate towards the end of this year, we'll start evaluating how did we do? We've got a year left. What's going to probably be done in this current plan? And what is likely going to move into the next plan? We did that with the previous strategic plan too. So for the most part, we're meeting the goals, we're meeting the focus areas of the plan, but there are some items that may not make it to the next plan, maybe shifts in priorities. But again, some of that is going to come from our Our citizens, what does our 2024 citizen survey say? Do our citizens care about something different? Are they saying like, hey, let's shift something as well? If that answers your question, but that's what I plan to do at the end of this year. And then 2025 will be more involved in learning what other cities are doing. Is anyone else doing it better or different than us? What strategies are there out in strategic planning? So, and partnering with, to me, the business community, our partners that work really well with the current strategic plan, but I think doing more of that outreach. We have our priorities as a city, doesn't mean we're going to adopt their priorities, but, having that conversation about where our priorities lie as a city, where we're going to go, how we're going to continue to meet that vision in 2035. How are we going to be the West premier city to live, work, and raise family? We got a lot of accolades and we're doing really well. And our citizen survey says we're doing really well comparatively to other cities. But how can we continue to raise that bar? So.
Mr. Mayor, just a follow-up.
Councilman Cowner.
I appreciate so much of that. And, we've had really robust conversations. Previous iterations of the strategic plan, I really, really struggled with because I felt it was an operational plan for City Hall. And the city of Meridian is more than just what the city of Meridian City Hall touches. And I applaud that you are reaching out and touching other facets of our community and thinking about how that can intertwine with our work. And I appreciate too that you're open to feedback and suggestions from the 6 council members as well. I think you're doing a really, really great job and really getting to the strategic plan to the place that I've always hoped it could be. And I want to commend you. I know you've driven a lot of that. I just want to say thanks.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay, next item up is item 26, ordinance number 24-2043. Ask the clerk to read this ordinance by title.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's an ordinance related to Compass Point subdivision H 2023-0004, annexing the northeast quarter of the northeast quarter of Section 30, Township 3 North, Range 1 East, Boise Meridian, City of Meridian, Ada County, Idaho. More particularly described in Exhibit A, rezoning 7.69 acres of such real property from RUT to R8. Zoning district directing city staff to alter all applicable use and area maps as well as the official zoning maps and all official maps depicting the boundaries in the zoning districts of the city of Meridian in accordance with this ordinance, providing that copies of this ordinance shall be filed with the Ada County Assessor, the Ada County Treasurer, the Ada County Recorder, and the Idaho State Tax Commission as required by law, repealing conflicting ordinances and providing an effective date.
Thank you, council. You've heard this ordinance read by title. Is there anybody that would like it read in its entirety? If not, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
I move that we approve ordinance number 24-2043.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 24-2043. Is there any discussion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh.
Aye.
I've got to say the name first. Sorry. Little Roberts.
Aye.
Taylor. Overton.
Aye.
Strader.
Aye.
Borton.
All ayes, motion carries, and unanimous agreed to. Next up is ordinance number 24-2044. Ask the clerk to read this ordinance by title.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's an ordinance related to Julia subdivision H 2023-0003, annexing the southeast quarter of the northeast quarter of Section 4, Township 3 North, Range 1 West, Boise Meridian, Ada County, Idaho. More particularly described in Exhibit A, rezoning 2.77 acres of such real property from RUT to R8 zoning district, directing city staff to alter all applicable use and area maps as well as the official zoning maps and all official maps depicting the boundaries and zoning districts of the city of Meridian in accordance with this ordinance, providing that copies of this ordinance shall be filed with the Ada County Assessor, the Ada County Treasurer, the Ada County Recorder, and the Idaho State Tax Commission as required by law, repealing conflicting ordinances and providing an effective date.
Thank you, council. You've heard this ordinance read by title. Is there anybody who would like it read in its entirety? If not, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
I move that we approve ordinance number 24-2044.
Second.
Have a motion, a second to approve ordinance number 24-2044. Is there any discussion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh.
Aye.
Little Roberts. Taylor. Overton.
Aye.
Strader. Borton.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carries, unanimous agreed to. Next item up is item 28, ordinance number 24-2045. Ask the clerk to read this ordinance by title.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's an ordinance related to I-84 and Meridian Road, H 2021-0099, annexing the northeast quarter of the southeast quarter of Section 13, Township 3 North, Range 1 West, Boise Meridian, Ada County, Idaho, more particularly described in Exhibit A, rezoning 18.3 acres of such real property from RUT to CG zoning district, directing city staff to alter all applicable use and area maps, as well as official zoning maps and all official maps depicting the boundaries and the zoning districts of the city of Meridian in accordance with this ordinance, providing that copies of this ordinance shall be filed with the Ada County Assessor, the Ada County Treasurer, the Ada County Recorder, and the Idaho State Tax Commission as required by law, repealing conflicting ordinances and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Council, you've heard this ordinance read by title. Is there anybody that would like it read in its entirety? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh, Little Roberts, Taylor, Overton,
Aye.
Strader, Borton. Did we have a motion?
Did not.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Oh, sorry about that. Councilman Overton.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve ordinance number 24-2045.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 24-2045. Is there any discussion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh.
Aye.
Little Roberts. Taylor. Overton.
Aye.
Strader. Borton.
All ayes, motion carries. The item is agreed to. Next item up is ordinance number 24-2046. Ask the clerk to read this ordinance by title.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's an ordinance related to Tanner Creek, H 2022-0048, for rezone of a parcel of land located in the southeast quarter of Section 13, Township 3 North, Range 1 West, Boise Meridian, Ada County, Idaho, more particularly described in Exhibit A, rezoning 12.16 acres of land from CG zoning district to R8 zoning district, and rezoning 17.46 acres of land from CG zoning district to R40 zoning district in the Meridian City Code, directing city staff to alter all applicable use and area maps, as well as the official zoning maps and all applicable official maps depicting the boundaries and the zoning districts of the city of Meridian in accordance with this ordinance, providing that copies of this ordinance shall be filed with the Ada County Assessor, the Ada County Treasurer, the Ada County Recorder, and the Idaho State Tax Commission as required by law, and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Council, you've heard this ordinance read by title. Is there anybody that would like it read in its entirety? If not, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
I move that we approve ordinance number 24-2046.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 24-2046. Is there any discussion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh.
Aye.
Little Roberts.
Aye.
Taylor. Overton.
Aye.
Strader. Borton.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carries. The item is agreed to. Next item up is item 30, which is ordinance number 24-2047. Ask the clerk to read this ordinance by title.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's an ordinance related to Tanner Creek, H 2022-0048, for rezone of a parcel of land located in the northwest quarter of the southeast quarter of Section 13, Township 3 North, Range 1 West, Boise Meridian, Ada County, Idaho, more particularly described in Exhibit A, rezoning 12.27 acres of land from CG zoning district to R15 zoning district in the Meridian City Code, directing city staff to alter all applicable use and area maps, as well as the official zoning maps and all applicable official maps depicting the boundaries and zoning districts of the city of Meridian in accordance with this ordinance, providing that copies of this ordinance shall be filed with the Ada County Assessor, the Ada County Treasurer, the Ada County Recorder, and the Idaho State Tax Commission as required by law, and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Council, you've heard this ordinance read by title. Is there anybody that would like it read in its entirety? If not, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
I move that we approve ordinance number 24-2047.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 24-2047. Is there any discussion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh.
Aye.
Little Roberts.
Aye.
Taylor. Overton.
Aye.
Strader. Borton.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carries, and the item is agreed to. We've reached the end of our agenda. Council, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Mayor, I move we adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned.